Hello and welcome to Politics War Room with James Carville, and I'm Al Hunt. This week our guest is author, political historian, Boston College professor, and Substack superstar Heather Cox Richardson. Now remember, we love taking your questions, so write into politicswarroom@gmail.com or send a tweet to @Politicon for next week's show. Now, we're going to get to as many as we can, but don't forget to tell us where you're from. And please check out the links to our sponsors, ExpressVPN, 3-Day Blinds, and Beam in our show notes. We thank you for supporting these sponsors. It really helps make this podcast happen. Please tell your friends about us and remind them to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Hey, our guest, James, is without exaggeration one of the most important figures in American public life. Heather Cox Richardson, eminent historian and scholar, and the superstar of Substack with Letters from an American. Heather, I would tell our listeners to immediately subscribe to your Substack letters, but you're so popular, I'd guess 90% already do. But those who haven't, start today.
Well, that's generous of you to say. The big thing, of course, is that my material is all free. And that's I think, important in this day and age when it's really hard to get good coverage without a paywall.
Yeah. Well, you have a paywall too. Don't you have both?
No. You can pay, but you don't have to.
Yeah. Well, we're just starting. We want to be junior varsity, Heather Cox Richardson. I don't know if we can get there, but we'll try your model. Let me start off by asking you, we're in a very tense, polarized time. As an historian, is there anything like this period?
There is, of course. There have been times like this in our past, and the 1850s come to mind, and certainly the 1890s. What's unique about this particular moment, and this I think is something people don't really grapple with to the degree they should, is that really, if you are under 55 years old or so, you don't really remember a time when democracy worked and when the Republican Party didn't try to gain power essentially by gaming the system. So it's not just a question of in this moment being polarized, it's really a question of the warping of our political system over a couple of generations and leaving us here in a moment when we need to try and fix that.
You've been traveling the country talking about your book. And where we are. Most people come to see you probably are closer to your political persuasion, I would guess. But what's your takeaway from those travels? And as a teacher, why are young people so lukewarm to Joe Biden?
So thank you for asking that question. Nobody has really asked me that before. And what has really surprised me about traveling the country, and remember, I make it a point not to go to the big cities and the big venues for the most part that other writers go to. I really prefer independent bookstores, states perhaps that others are not so eager to get to. And what I think I see, and what I certainly hear from the communications I get from people around the country is I really do think there is a movement underway in this country, largely driven by women, but not entirely driven by women, who really would like to see our democracy being recovered and having guardrails put in that will give us back the kind of world that we imagined we could have. And, it just does not show up in the traditional media. It really just doesn't. And yet, if you go out to Missouri, for example, or Tennessee, or some of the other states that are maybe not in the headlines every day, you see people really working to take back school boards and to take back town meetings and to take back the forms of their democracy. And that I just think is really cool. It reminds me a lot of the populists in the 1890s.
Yeah, no, that is. Let me ask you this, though, about the campaign this year. President Biden, who you have interviewed, really has unrivaled accomplishments for a first-term president. Yet he's in danger of losing to a 4-time indictee who ignited the worst violent assault on the Capitol since the British in 1812 or 14, whose malfeasance cost hundreds of thousands of lives during COVID. James and I believe it's not about ideology or his policies or the appeal of his opponent, but it's his age. And that's pretty hard to address, isn't it?
Yeah, I actually disagree with that.
Do you?
Yeah, I do. But remember, I'm an idealist, which means not, that I can hunt ducks at the rake. It means that I believe ideas change society. And, I was just reading this morning about the marks that Biden is getting on the economy. And he, of course, has really overseen a dramatic, boom in the American economy. It's in really terrific shape, and he's handled it incredibly well. And yet most people who are talking about the economy keep talking about how wonderful it was under Trump. And just objectively, it was not. The numbers are very much in favor of Biden over the way that Trump managed the economy. And I would actually make an argument that the issue is not his age. The issue is the media coverage that he has gotten, because people believe what they read, and what they have read is that nothing is more important than inflation. And, that actually really worries me, because it's not just that. I was also reading today that there was this recent thing about about Trump suggesting to oil executives that if they would donate $1 billion to his campaign, he would make sure to get rid of all the climate change investment that Biden and the Biden administration has made. And the only real traditional media that covered that was MSNBC, and that was primarily Ari Velcher. And about 40% of that coverage was Ari Velcher. And the major outlets did not cover that. Well, having the presumptive nominee on the Republican side asking for $1 billion bribe from oil companies seems like it should be headline news. And that's just not something that people are hearing. So I'm very concerned about the coverage going into this election that we're looking at, not least because, of course, we had a similar moment in the 1890s when, the mainstream media simply presented a vision of what was happening or what would happen under a Democratic president, and managed to crash the economy and give us the biggest landslide victory of a midterm election ever in 1894. And that's, concerning.
Well, I certainly agree with you on that story. I would point out that Josh Dawsey of the Washington Post was the one that broke that story. I mean, yes, they've been out front, and MSNBC followed, which they should do. But it was the Post has done a great job on that. But
and Dawsey has been doing phenomenal stuff.
He's a fabulous reporter. James,
he really
is going to want to pick up on something. Let me ask you one more question. This time about Trump. America, as you know better than any of us, has had more than its share of demagogues, certainly during the Civil War, later the anti-Semitic lost causes, including the president of Colombia, Nicholas Butler, Joe McCarthy, George Wallace. Yet Trump has gone higher than any of them. Has America changed, or is Trump just a more effective demagogue?
What a wonderful question. I think Trump is the product of 40 years of a certain kind of rhetoric that the Republicans used to garner power. But I think he also took that stream and turned it into a movement in a way that nobody before him had been able to do. Somebody like Huey Long in the 1930s certainly tried, but he was assassinated before he could make that become really national. Father Coughlin, the same thing in the same period, but he too was stopped before he managed to create a movement. And he'd never held political office. I don't think America has changed. I think those things have always been there, but I think 40 years of rhetoric permitting that kind of behavior and championing it has created a world in which people feel they can garner power through this sort of hatred and grievance in a way that really I don't think we have seen before, with the possible exception of the elite enslavers in the American South in the 1850s.
Wow. James.
Well, first of all, I could jump through this computer and kiss you for talking about this oil scandal. I've been screaming at the computer since right after the story broke. I mean, this blows the dome off the Teapot Dome scandal. I mean, that looks like a paltry thing compared to $1 billion to fix any price you want or circumvent any regulation you want. But so, Professor, the fight over history is endless. It's ongoing. It never stops. The history of history. And I think you and I share a view that the history of Reconstruction is a lot of it is still going on as to what it was, the original interpretations, the Columbia, the Dunning School, all that garbage coming out of there. But the way that people look at the world is a lot determined by the way that they look at Reconstruction, even people that don't think about it or even know what it was. So, it's kind of personal to me because my great-grandfather was a Republican member of the Louisiana legislature. So,
in what year? When?
Kind of 1870-ish.
Oh, wow.
He was a floor leader for Governor Pinchback, who was the appointed black governor.
Right. Have you written about that?
I did. Somebody, a PhD student, went and did research. I'll try to get it to you.
I'd love to see it.
And he was born in Ireland and fought in the Union. It was my great-grandfather. I mean, not my great-great-grandfather. And so I was taught by a historian at LSU by the name of T. Harry Williams, who's quite an accomplished historian, who thought the whole lost cause thing was garbage. He wasn't a very man given to emotion very much. But take us through Reconstruction and where it's been in history, where it is now, and where it should be, and how should it be looked at.
In a nutshell, right?
Yeah, in a nutshell. Yeah, I know you got a weak text.
So one of the things that's really important to remember about Reconstruction is that during the American Civil War, the Republicans in Congress and Abraham Lincoln in the White House did two things that were really important for the future. One was that they provided not only for Black freedom, but also eventually during the early years of Reconstruction for Black suffrage. That is, after the Military Reconstruction Act of March 1867, Black men would be able to vote. At the same time, they also invented national taxation for the first time in American history. Previously, national taxes had been collected at the state level. There was no such thing as national taxation. And that conjunction of the idea that you let Black men, not women yet, but Black men vote, at the same time you provided for the national government to tax people, was going to be a really poisonous equation. Because what happened is that immediately after the Civil War, when the federal government began to protect Black rights in the southern states, in the summer of 65, a number of former Confederates step up and they say, hey, listen, we never cared about enslavement. That was never why we fought the Civil War, which is complete crap. That's exactly why they fought the Civil War. They said the reason that we didn't want the federal government to become strong enough to challenge enslavement is that we recognized that pretty soon that would mean that the federal government was going to come down here and tell us how to deal with our people. And that's 65. And in the summer of 65, 66, you get a number of southern states that are putting in place something called black codes. And that's sort of its own rabbit hole. But these were laws that essentially circumscribed the lives of the newly freed Black Americans in the American South. And what happens is that you get the rise of organizations like the Ku Klux Klan to try and keep Black Americans from having rights in the South. And so in response to that, of course, in 68, we get the 14th Amendment. And then in 1870, we get the 15th Amendment to the Constitution. And crucially, in that year, we also get the construction and the establishment of the Department of Justice. So all of a sudden, by 1870, if you're a white former Confederate in the South who wants to end Black rights, you run the risk of going to jail for participating in the KKK. And in 71, what they start to say is, hey, listen, we don't have any problem with Black participation in society based on race, which is, of course, now illegal. They say our real problem is that if you let Black people vote, they're going to vote for things like roads and schools and hospitals. And the only way you can pay for that is with taxes. And taxes are going to come from the people who have property, and those are white people, especially hardworking white men. And that means that letting Black people participate in the political process is virtually socialism. And we need to get rid of that. And that construction, that idea that if you let those people vote, they're going to take tax dollars away from white people for things, by the way, that white Americans were going to use as well, is a form of socialism, is something we've lived with really ever since. But it took off again in our history, especially after the Brown versus Board of Education in May of 1954. So that's really, if you think about Reconstruction, the real central question is about what role should the federal government play in guaranteeing that the states cannot circumscribe the lives of the people who live within it. And that's exactly what we're dealing with nowadays.
Well, I always say my favorite amendment is the 13th Amendment, but the 16th is a really close second.
Why? Why the 16th?
Because it authorized an income tax. And the greatest tax devised by the mind of man is a progressive tax on income with a broad definition of income. So there is no finer method for a government to raise money. And the language of the 16th Amendment is not vague at all.
So, of course, it's the Republicans during the Civil War who do that. And who have those conversations.
And they couldn't, and then the progressives got it done. I mean, for all of anything anybody ever did, I still say the 13th is my favorite, but the 16th is definitely the second by a long shot.
I'm just shocked because for me, it's the 14th. I mean, I will stop people in the supermarket and talk about the 14th because unless you have the ability to come in with a majority and stop discrimination in the states, we don't have any rights.
Right. Well, I'm being a little dramatic, but that's how much I like the 16th Amendment.
I like them both, but I kind of like the first too. But anyway, whatever.
Whatever. So here we are, at a point, and it will seem like we're regressing. I mean, we always sort of took progress, and it was an arc of history bends toward justice, and it was a struggle, but we got through civil rights, and we got through women's rights, and it's been a hard slog, but they've always had the goal in end. Do you have a sense that we're in a regressive part of history right now?
Yeah, the pendulum has swung back, but that's sort of one of the cool things about democracy is it's never done. I mean, we always have the ability to change it and the responsibility to fight for it. I will suggest, I'm working on something new now, and I think one of the things that we are not sufficiently grappling with in the present is that the current backlash under which we're living, the reactionary movement on the part of the radical Republicans, has been fed by misogyny to a degree that I don't think we are fully grappling with. And that, if you look at the rise of the evangelical right, if you look at the white evangelical right, if you look at the rise of the extraordinary anti-abortion movement in that period, if you look at, the circumscription of so many of women's rights currently, I think it's a mistake not to recognize that that's perhaps something that we thought was accomplished, and it really wasn't. And if you were looking carefully enough at the rise, for example, of the Fox News channel and its sort of a dollification of the women presenters, it's something I feel like we should have had a better grasp of before the Dobbs decision.
Well, I'm going to turn it to Albert to make one comment about the history of history. And that is, there's a lot to learn from the lost cause. They just made something up. They had the Southern Historical Society. They had a narrative. They actually had people writing bullshit scholarly articles. They made Lee into something he never was, a truly great general. But it is amazing how they laid the groundwork to establish this narrative. As false and as horrible as that narrative was, we're still living with it. We haven't completely flushed that out at all.
No, we're still living with it. And think about what would happen if we were to let the Trump movement continue. We would have our own new lost cause in which the people who attacked the Capitol on January 6th were the continuation of the Confederates.
So spot on. Thank you. That is the new lost cause. That they put this whole thing out of nothing, jubal early. I mean, good God Almighty! But you got to learn from success, and they were very successful at what they set out to do.
You control the narrative, you control the history, and that's something that certainly the modern day Republicans have figured out.
Agreed upon thing.
Heather, my grandmother ran a flower shop in a little southern town, was a wonderful woman, died in 1978. She was a member of the United Daughters of the Confederacy. The lost cause was really it was the root of that. That's what it was all about. And she not only had pictures of General Lee, which we always had to coin, but he even had pictures of his horse in the house. So, I mean, this thing lives for a long time. Let me
Traveler.
ask you. Traveler.
Traveler.
Oh.
Traveler. But Traveler is the name of the Safe Ride program at Washington and Lee still.
Is it really?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it's spelled with the double L, the British spelling, after the horse.
And, of course, the person they all hated was the most distinguished graduate of my wife's high school, Richmond Academy in Augusta, Georgia, General Longstreet.
Yes.
He was the great traitor. He was actually a better
He
was a better general than Lee, but in any event, let me ask you this. You've studied so much history. I don't remember any politician who has ever dominated a party the way Trump does. Not FDR, not Reagan. It's not a Republican Party anymore. It's a Trump party. He snaps his fingers and they come too. Have you ever seen anything like that?
No. And that's why I say one of the things that is interesting about this moment is that if you, again, are a Republican under 55, you seem to think that that's the way that a party is supposed to work. The fact that he has taken over the Republican National Committee, the fact they didn't have a platform in 2020 except to say we're going to do whatever Trump wants, the fact that he's managed to put his family members into the party, and also the fact that at his criminal trial in Manhattan in the past week, you've actually had the Speaker of the House showing up and attacking the judicial system at the behest of Donald Trump with the apparent intention of overturning the judge's gag rule. It is antithetical to democracy. And one of the things that I was actually thinking about this morning, I was reading something from the Bulwark. I think it was retweeted by Bill Kristol, about how if, in fact, Trump wins in 2024, it will be the culmination of the greatest psychological operation ever in foreign affairs, which would be on the part of Vladimir Putin to bring down the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, and the United States. And I thought about that, and I thought of George Washington and I don't think a lot about George Washington. I'm kind of a later person, and thinking about what he would say looking at this and his real determination for us not to have a king and not to have a world in which ordinary Americans did not have rights. And just think he would say, it was a great experiment, and we thought maybe it would work, and it turned out it didn't.
Oh, what a frightening thought, but I think you're right on. I'm going to turn it over to James for a final question, but I want to ask you one parochial question. You live in Maine. I love that state. I just think it's fabulous. But it is my contention, it has produced per capita more great politicians than any other state in the country. Joshua Chamberlain, Margaret Chase Smith, Ed Muskie, George Mitchell, Bill Cohen, now Angus King. What is it in the Pine Tree State water that produces all those great political figures, Heather?
Truthfully, I don't think that's illegitimate. I think it is partly that it's such a small state. We all know each other. We live in fairly small towns so that we are all mixed up politically. We have a very good education system. And one of the things that people forget about the state of Maine, even if they live here, is that because of the fact our economy has always depended on shipping, we've always had a big influx of people from around the world. So there is not the sort of parochialism you might find at places that have less truck with the outside world. And yeah, it's exactly right. And we still have that in a funny way. I live in a town where, I think we're probably slightly redder than we are blue, but we don't divide on politics. We really work to build the community together. And that's it's a really special place.
Oh, it's a fabulous state with really terrific politicians. James Carville, wrap up this fascinating conversation.
So, there's so much, but just try to put in. I know it's a broad question, but excited. Have you ever seen corruption on the scale that Trump not had only done but the things that he's tried to do are just breathtaking beyond belief, and we've just lost his whole ability to have any kind of outrage about anything.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, it's not only the corruption, it's also the fact that they have also corrupted the judicial system. So it's hard to bring that to the bar of justice. The level of corruption, though, I think reflects something that may be more familiar to you coming from the South, is that you get that sort of corruption in a political system when you have a one-party state. And of course, the American South from about 1874 to about 1965 was a one-party state. And you saw that kind of corruption except at the state level. Now we're seeing it at the national level. And we're seeing it especially in states like Ohio and Mississippi. You pointed those out to me at one point. Places where there isn't oversight because the other party never has a chance either to get control of the state legislature or of the newspapers in the state. And so much of what we're seeing is the systemic corruption because there hasn't been oversight of that particular political party. And that goes back to gerrymandering and voter suppression and on, things that we simply must correct if we're going to carry democracy forward. Because, in a fair system where you've got a real two-party system, the other party overlooks the other side, and people gonna people, right? So there's always going to be corrupt people, but you're not going to protect them the way that people have protected these current day MAGA Republicans.
Well, but the funniest thing and most truthful and painful thing I read is somebody said Abe Fortas must be turning over in his grave. What he got in trouble for, from Abe Fortas to Clarence Thomas, history of the deterioration of modern America.
Well, and Nixon looks like a choir boy compared to.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
God.
Well, I'll tell you something else, Heather. I think in today's environment with social media and Fox News, I doubt that Nixon would have been impeached by the House.
I think that's right. Right.
Yeah, but it's the corruption in the Supreme Court. God damn! I mean, it's one institution you think would be above it. I don't think they care.
So how do you fix it? You guys know this is your world. How do you fix it?
Well, first you have to point people to it that care about this, which has not happened. It was definitely not going to happen on Trump. As I understand them, that only people can police themselves and them. And if you don't have, and you get the story about Gorsuch selling his house to a lawyer that he couldn't sell it, just sell it to. I mean, you look at Alito, who said, well, there was an empty seat on the G5. I mean, really? You're a Supreme Court justice? And I mean, if you get started on Clarence Thomas and Hall and Crow and that whole outfit, and Kavanaugh, and they all lied. First of all, it all begins with a lie. Are you really going to tell me that Amy Coney Barrett didn't have a position on abortion? Or Kavanaugh? Well, I don't know. I'll have to study the law. When I get there, you're full of shit. You're lying. It's blatant prima facie case of perjury. And you start with a lie, you end with a lie. That's my view. But
Heather, you asked, how do you fix it? There's a simple answer: elections. Elections matter.
Yeah.
There's no other way to do it. And if those young people you teach and others don't realize that, then we're in real trouble.
So that the only thing that really worries me on that front, the Ute, as they say, are fine. They really are. But they have never seen a political system that operates as a democracy. And they have ceased to believe in it. A lot of them have, with good reason. I mean, you look at the fact that more than 80% of Americans want common sense gun safety legislation, and we can't get it. And they sit there and say, why should I support a system that doesn't really have institutions? And one of the things that I really try and press in the stuff that I write and the stuff I do is the importance of institutions. They don't work all the time ever, because people, as I say, are people, and they break the laws. They do things that are antisocial. But without those institutions, we don't have any framework for defending rights. And that's something that we really dropped the ball on, I think, after about 1960, is impressing on people the need for institutions and the rule of law. And, nowadays, lots of people don't even know what the rule of law is, because for so long we thought we would never lose it. We didn't have to think about it.
Well, why would they have any affection for it if the Supreme Court doesn't believe in it?
Yeah.
Why does a third grade obligated to tell the truth when you can lie at your confirmation hearing? I mean, just what the hell? I really enjoyed this, Professor. Thank you so much.
And we can't thank you enough. This has been as interesting a session as we've had. And I would just say to all of our listeners out there, if you haven't already, go to Substack, Heather Cox Richardson, Letters for an American, from an American. And then as an afterthought, there's always old Carville and Hunt, Politics War Room. Heather, thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure, you guys.
All right.
Thanks.
Protect your family online with ExpressVPN. It's so easy, even James Carville could get it. You look at all these stories, all these people that get hacked and get stolen and sold to someone else, and the Chinese and God knows who's not. If you don't think that's a problem, then you got a problem.
Yeah, you do. Using the internet without ExpressVPN is like walking your dog without a leash. There's always a danger that one day your dog runs away or gets dog napped. Every time you go online, there's a similar chaotic risk. In life, it's better to be careful, especially when it's as simple as using ExpressVPN. Each time you connect to an unencrypted network in cafes, hotels, airports, and other public spaces, your online data is not secured. Hackers on the same network can gain access to your personal data and steal it. That's why ExpressVPN is a must. It creates a secure, encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet so they can't get your data, and you stay secure. You'll greatly increase your anonymity, and there's no better weapon against malicious actors in the digital world than ExpressVPN. They've crunched the numbers. It would take a hacker with a supercomputer over 1 billion years to get past ExpressVPN's encryption. Fortunately, ExpressVPN works on all your devices, your phone, laptop, tablet, even on your smart TV. It's so easy to use. James and I want to get it working right away. Just fire up the app and click one button to get protected. And as you know, we, especially James, are on the road a lot, and it feels great knowing that you can work securely from anywhere in the world thanks to ExpressVPN. Not only that, any research that we or you are working on or any interest that you're exploring stays safe from big tech. But one of the big reasons ExpressVPN is a must is that it keeps your family safe too. With kids and grandkids, nothing is more important than making sure they're protected online. We know you'll feel the same way. So sign up for ExpressVPN and start protecting yourself and your loved ones with a click. Right now, get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN free at expressvpn.com/warroom. That's expressvpn.com/warroom. Again, expressvpn.com/warroom. You also can find the link in our show notes. James, I rarely watch cable television during the day, but I've been pretty much glued to the Trump trial and reading the Times and the Post. We're not in the courtroom, and it's different when you're just getting accounts. It's clear what happened in October 2016. Trump, after Access Hollywood, thought if a porn star revealed a sexual encounter, it would lose the election for him. So he got his fixer, Michael Cohen, to pay her hush money. But, this case is complicated for a jury. Hush money, that's obvious. But the accounting and the intent of how they accounted for it is harder. And I'm worried that this complication makes it easier for a holdout or two. Knowing nothing, I'm just getting reports on television and in the Post and Times. And Michael Cohen is the prosecution's star witness. He's a convicted criminal, a pathological liar who's making money off him constantly expressing his hatred for Trump, who he thinks turned on him. Now, if this jury does what I think they should do, which is view this like a mob trial, that's really what it is. You didn't convict with witnesses from monastic nuns. Al Capone was convicted by a cashier from his illegal gambling house. Sammy the Bull Gravano turned on his old boss, John Gotti. A conviction is a lot easier. If it's seen as a political trial, kind of Trump versus Cohen, I worry about the outcome, James.
Well, I guess I worry about it, but I don't know. And I always wanted to see there's certain elements that judge is going to tell the jury that the people had to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. I don't know. But what I do think, and it's certainly a possibility that you have the lone juror, but that doesn't happen that often. And it's very hard when all the jurors are together and everybody says, come on, man, we decided this, and you hold out. I'm not telling you this is not a possibility. What I'm telling you is I think it's an exaggerated possibility.
Yeah.
Now, if there are 4 people that hold out, that's quite another. That's another matter for sure. But I don't know whether to be worried or not, because I think most of the analysis that I see is speculative. I mean, what did they want to accomplish with Michael Cohen? Is that necessary part of the chain of evidence that you have to show to get a conviction? I mean, I know there was a lot of fireworks and shit like that, but I think most of the analysis I've seen is just too general.
Yeah, he was their final witness, so I think he was a key. Look, the whole thing is disgusting. And I want to talk about those Republican politicians. Trump called them, come to Manhattan to support him. Alabama's Tommy Tuberville arrived after they explained to him that Manhattan was in New York, not Kansas. House Speaker Mike Johnson was there, taking orders from his boss, the Don. Now, this really does reveal Johnson's true character. He's gotten a lot of good press for the Ukraine thing, and I certainly agree with that. But he really is he's a cipher for Trump. He professes to believe in separation of power, constitutional expert. Yet he's demagoguing against a trial which he has no familiarity. Probably under orders from Trump, he railed against the Justice Department, weaponizing the criminal justice system against Republicans. If Speaker Johnson had walked just a few blocks down the street, he'd have seen another trial. It's the trial of New Jersey Senator Menendez, a senior Senate Democrat indicted by the feds. This case is a Manhattan case, a local case, so it's hard for the Justice Department to weaponize that. Or if you're going to Texas, you look at the federal indictment of Congressman Henry Cuellar, a senior House Democrat. Michael Johnson, I'm sorry, but like Michael Cohen, he's lying on this. And I just find the whole thing sickening. I find, frankly, the Cohen defense attorney, Lanny Davis, pretending like he's, John Gardner. He's represented some sleazy characters in the past. This is just another one. But if he's as close to Cohen as he claims, how did he let Cohen go out there and all those podcasts and all those statements and wearing a shirt with Trump behind bars just weeks before this trial? That was a gift to Trump's lawyers.
Well, I think the big thing, when the state is going to rest, and I can't get the words out of my mouth to sufficiently say what I think is going to happen. If he refuses to testify, and my understanding of the law is that in closing arguments, considering evidence, you're not allowed to consider that as evidence of anything. I understand that. We have a right against self-incrimination. To exercise it, that's been there forever. Mm-hmm. But as a political act, and I was really thought that this oil $1 billion for do anything. Thank God that Congressman Raskin sent the White House on it. But the political ramifications of him not testifying need to be exploited to the maximum, because he runs his mouth. He said he would testify. Mm-hmm. Of course, he said that. And he said before that if you take the fifth, that's a sign of guilt. He's pontificated on all of this. And all of his people have this exaggerated view. Yeah, I'll tell you what, that son of a bitch is a tough guy. He'll stand up to those, the coastal liberals. Well, you say the trial is this, you have every right to testify. Your lawyer has every right to engage you in direct examination. You have every right to tell your side of the story. Why don't you do it, big boy? You said you would. And if we get into this legalese, and there's any number of reasons, and maybe legally there are any number of reasons that you don't testify, but politically, this thing has to be, it has to be driven like a sledgehammer on a 10-penny nail. And I hope we do it, but I for somehow or another, the Democratic message machine, they let too many things go by. I guarantee you, if it was Biden on trial and he didn't testify on his own behalf, you would not hear the end of it on Fox. So I didn't fuck the legalese of it. I don't know. I can't tell you what's going on. I don't think that a lot of the analysis is telling us if the state is proving its case or not, which was the only thing that matters to that jury. But God damn it, if he doesn't testify, exploit it big time.
Well, you're absolutely right. I'm afraid some Democrats will say, well, every man's entitled not to testify. Bullshit. That's true in a court of law. But
right.
in a court of politics, this is the guy who said, I'm a big, tough guy. Of course I'll testify. Right. Just let me at him. And then
he's promised that he would.
Right.
Of course, it didn't mean anything. But his so much of his appeal is just macho shit, and so much of Democratic messaging should be to mock him and make fun of him, because that's the one thing. But I don't know. I don't know about the trial. I like anybody else, I hear different things, but I don't know if the state has proven its case or not. But when that judge gives those instructions, that's the only thing those jurors are going to talk about.
Yeah.
They listen to the fucking judge.
And he is a very good and a very fair judge. So we'll see what happens.
I know he is. His experience and his instructions are going to be really taken seriously. And how he instructs a jury is going to be probably the most important thing in a trial. It really is.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And I don't know. I mean, I guess these analysts are saying this and that. I mean, Todd Blanche told the jury straight up that Trump didn't even have sex with Stormy Daniels. Okay, it'd be pretty hard not to believe that he did, and a jury will make you pay for that.
James,
they'll make you pay for that.
Just a simple question. And, if he didn't have sex with her, why the hell did they pay her $130,000?
Of course,
yeah.
And that's going now that point is that can be made in oral argument,
right?
In closing arguments. Yeah. I think that's a totally legit point.
It is, and it's totally true.
Mr. Blanche told you at the beginning this. Why would you believe anything else he says?
Yeah.
I mean, he wants you to not believe Michael Cohen. And the other question that the legal analysts, I always would say, is the documentary ever, does a conviction hang on believing Michael Cohen? Now, I can't believe the prosecution is so stupid that they would leave that is the key thing to take you beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right.
But I don't like, I shouldn't say, because I don't listen to all the analysis, but the analysis I see and read is a lot about courtroom atmospherics and cross-exam and this and that. But what I don't have a sense of is the evidence of jury's conviction being presented. I don't know that it's not.
You do hear that this jury is paying rapt attention. They are not distracted much, and that I think is a good sign.
They're going to pay attention. I mean, the jury's going to be fucking serious. Most all juries are.
Yeah, well, this appears to be a really attentive one. James, let me switch to the Democrats. I got to tell you, the most disquieting report this week was from the very good Axios reporter Hans Nichols, who said the Biden campaign just told him they dismiss all this talk about bad polls. They claim they're running ahead or even at the worst. No, they are not. The Real Clear Politics average, pretty good barometer, shows Trump more than a point ahead nationally. More important, the New York Times, Siena, and the Bloomberg Morning Consult surveys, the battleground states, both show Trump winning almost all. If the election were held today, I think even most Democrats acknowledge Trump would win. Fortunately, it's not being held today. Biden could still reverse this, but only if they get their head out of the sands and significantly up their games. Which they haven't done. The other news, James, was that both candidates said they would debate in June and September, but rejected the Presidential Debate Commission. Color me skeptical that there's ever going to be a debate.
Well, let's start with the polling. First of all, polling gets a much worse rap than it deserves. It's actually pretty damn accurate. And I would point out a couple of things. Does the White House poll? Does the Super PAC poll? Of course they're polling. They're polling 2 times a week. Mike Donlin, who was a pollster, a really good one. He was a pollster who did the polling for us in Pennsylvania back in 1986. He worked for Cadell. So the idea that Mike Donlin doesn't believe in polling is ludicrous. And of course they believe in polling. Now, I mean,
I think the piece said they didn't believe the polling was bad for them. I think that's what it said. And it is.
Well, it may be different methodologies. I have a Substack piece I'm putting up that goes through different ways you do things, but they're universally the same. And the chances that they're wrong, they weren't wrong in 2022. They weren't wrong in 2016. Yeah. And in 2016, some of the late breaking state stuff they didn't catch. But they're either behind a little bit or maybe at best tied. But to say you don't believe it is just
behind in the states.
It's just unnecessary. Yeah. And you're right. And the guy went out of the way and said we really don't believe it. You got to understand this. We're not just saying this. We really, really don't believe it. Okay.
Yeah.
How many polls you look at of your own polls? What is you believe your own polls?
No.
I just think I don't think it's a huge deal, but it's unnecessary and it's aggravating.
It is. James, you just reminded me that we are on Substack now, Politics War Room, and we encourage all of our listeners to get Carville Unfiltered, and maybe even a column or so by Hunt. Just go to Substack. James, one more thing before we leave the Democrats. There were a bunch of primaries this week. Any takeaways?
Yeah, I do have a takeaway. As you know, I've always kind of, loved it's always the Democrats in disarray. Oh, this was bad news, and Bobby Kennedy. I never thought Bobby Kennedy was bad news for Biden. There was bad news for Republicans last night. First of all, Nikki Haley just consistently getting, in places like Nebraska,
Indiana,
West Virginia, Indiana. Okay, I'm sorry. That means something. And it's not just a little bit. She's getting between 20 and 25%, which is a lot. And I'll tell you who else did not have a good night. One, Larry Hogan. Remember, he only got 66, 67% in a Republican primary. And they had a Trumper with no money that got 24% or something like that. It just was not. I know the Democrats had a close primary. I don't think there's going to be much trouble with them closing right, but that was not. It was the Republicans have a fifth of them that just can't stand Trump, and a fifth of them that won't vote for someone who's thought to be an anti-Trumper. They got significant cross currents in their party that are, I think, not sufficiently appreciated by a lot of people in the commentary.
Amen.
And I think last night exposed that.
Absolutely. And even they were winning in Nebraska, but the whole state party came out against the governor, the congressional candidates. Now they won, but there is a big block of dissenters. Let me just say one thing about Maryland. The Democrat who won, Angela Ashbrook, I believe is her name, Prince George's county executive, a very impressive woman, a moderate progressive. That's what she campaigned on. The Democrats who were for the other candidate, David Trone, was because he had big money in the fall, and they wouldn't have to spend a lot of money in Maryland. But I think that she's raised a bunch of money. She's a good candidate. She's running ahead of Hogan in the polls, and I think Democrats can relax a little bit about Maryland.
Yeah, I do too. And again, I think the most encouraging thing was the Republican primary.
Yep.
Those people, down in Southern Maryland and Western Maryland, they're very Trumpy. We all think it's Montgomery County. It's not.
Those are my people down in Calvert County, James.
Right.
Although they do vote for Steny Hoyer.
There you go.
Okay.
3-day blinds makes blinds easy. It's so funny. Washington didn't think of this before. I have no idea. But there's nothing that I like better in a like Louisiana July or August day than have the air conditioner on 65. And, the room is dark as it can possibly be. And even so, you wake up because in the summertime, the sun comes up pretty early in the morning. And, you forget the blinds, you just click it, and there you're back in darkness, and you got another hour and a half sleep, which let me tell you, for an extra hour and a half sleep, I'd give anything. It's a great invention. Great invention.
Oh, it didn't matter much 40 years ago. It matters a lot now. My whole life, my blinds or curtains would always let light in at the crack of dawn. It's a rude awakening. And, if I left them open, getting out of bed to close them was a real pain. You really do wonder, why aren't my blinds smart and automated? Luckily, we discovered a better way to buy blinds and window treatments. It's called 3-Day Blinds. They are the leading manufacturer of custom window treatments in the U.S. And right now they're running a buy one, get one 50% off deal. We can shop for almost anything at home. So shop for blinds at home too. 3-Day Blinds, local, professionally trained design consultants average 10 plus years of experience in providing expert guidance on the right blinds for you right in the comfort of your home. Just set up an appointment and you'll get a free, no obligation quote the same day. We love that the expert team at 3-Day Blind handles all the heavy lifting. They design, measure, and install for you so you can sit back and relax and leave it to the pros. Once we heard about them, we knew it was time to upgrade, because their blinds come in tons of great styles. So it's an easy sell on the family. With 3-Day Blinds, we're excited to be getting better sleep and opening and closing blinds from the comfort of your bed. Alexa, I slept great. Now let there be light. We know you'll like 3-Day Blinds as much as we all do. So go ahead and pick from thousands of options made for any budget or style. Plus, after 45 years in business, they're the highest rated blinds company on Trustpilot. It's the perfect spring project, especially because they do all the work. Transform your home with 3-Day Blinds. Now, right now, they're running a buy one, get one 50% off deal on custom blinds, shades, shutters, and drapery for a free, no charge, no obligation consultation. Just head to 3dayblinds.com/war room. That's buy one, get one 50% off when you head to 3dayblinds.com/war room. One last time. That's the number 3day, D-A-Y, blinds.com/war room. You also can find the link in our show notes. Hey, James, now for the outrage of the week. There were a couple speeches about taxes. Now, the context is the 2017 Trump tax cuts, skewed heavily to the wealthy, expire next year. So Congress has to do something. They either have to be extended at a cost of $4 billion over a decade, ended, or amended. Leo Brainerd, Biden's top economist, says they want to extend the tax cuts for those making $400,000 or less, and increase them on affluent taxpayers and raise the corporate tax rate to 28%, where it was for a long time, from 21%. And they would use the gained revenue for programs like the child tax credit, which reduces child poverty, and use much of it to reduce the deficit. By the way, interest on the debt now costs more than defense or Medicare, which I learned from John Ellis's Substack this week. Trump, by contrast, proposes to extend all those tax cuts and double down across the board new tax cuts and more goodies, he says, for the rich and corporations. Let's assume that's going to cost, when you toss in extending the earlier ones, $6 billion over a decade. Now, at the same time, and it's not hard to keep up with this, listeners, at the same time, Republicans in the Freedom Caucus and right-wing members say we have to slash the deficit, maybe even mandate a balanced budget. Okay, to get to dramatically lower deficits, much less a balanced budget, while dramatically cutting taxes, you'd have to slash not just discretionary spending for poor people to the bone, but go after Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. This is not only a good debate, but a critical one for 2025. It's up to the media to frame it accurately. Don't let Trump get away with bluster and evasion, because you cannot lower the deficit without touching entitlements or at the same time embracing massive tax cuts. We want that debate, James.
Well, anytime that a Republican talks about the deficit, if they don't mention how much Trump and Bush contributed to the deficit, they're full of shit. I don't pay attention to anything they say.
That's one way of putting it, for sure.
I'll just throw it out, because the deficit is only an issue when a Democrat is president. In terms of extending the tax cuts or doing away with tax cuts, people make over $4,000 a year. Understand, that's about the most popular thing you can have in Poland, is taxing people over $400,000 a year. And that's just what it is. Now, and he should be nakedly political, because this is a political year. What I wish he would say is, I'm going to take it's $4 trillion. I'm going to take $500 billion and use it for relief for first-time home buyers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that would help with younger people, because they don't feel like they can buy a goddamn house because the interest rates are too high, and we keep telling them that the economy is great when they don't feel it. And this would show that somehow or another you understand what's going on in their life. And I know people will reduce it as a gimmick and that kind of shit, but let them reduce it as a gimmick. I don't care. At any rate, my outrage is, first of all, let me exempt Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island and Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland. If you pick this up, why they don't pick up this story about the oil company people saying Trump said if they raised him $1 billion, they could write their own check. I mean, you understand, if you go and look at a poll, the number one reason that people ascribe to high inflation is corporate price fixing. And listen to Mark Penn's jackass piece in the New York Times. Understand, you can't have anything more popular than this, and nothing confirms an existing suspicion more than all companies getting together and rigging high energy, high gas prices. And why they're not just clobbering this thing, I have no earthly idea. And finally, I saw one of the more progressive, I think it's Daily Kos or Coos, or however you pronounce it, he's finally picked up on the idea of Katie Britt's pregnancy register. So you're going to register, the Republicans want you to register when you're pregnant. What the fuck, you want the Alabama Baptist coming down on you? You want to get a visit from the Archbishop? I mean, we have got to seize these opportunities that we get, and we got to drive them home like crazy and quit fucking leaking stories about you believe polls or you don't believe polls. Who cares if you believe polls or not?
Absolutely.
Jesus, gets homeowners relief. Attack the fucking price rigging in all companies, pregnancy registers.
James, I saw Josh Dawsey of the Washington Post last night, who broke that story about the oil zillionaires going to Mar-a-Lago, and Trump said, give me $1 billion and you can write an energy plan. I've been writing about money in politics for over 50 years. This is the worst case, the most clear-cut case I have ever seen. Perhaps more importantly, Fred Wertheimer, who has been following it for more than that, agreed. This is outrageous, and it cannot. It's got to be front and center.
Well, yeah. What's the bigger outrage? The facts of the story, or the fact that no one knows about it?
Well,
yeah. I mean, it is. It's like it's so bad. It's so incomprehensible. And the oil companies are the people that leaked the story to the Washington Post.
Well, I didn't confirm that with Josh, but I think you're probably right.
Well, who could it come from?
Yeah.
I mean, just, the dog that did bark. But goddamn, what is wrong? Why are we not it's the White House, but I tell you, I put a lot of blame on board left-of-center outlets and cable TV. I don't know why seeing. Can you imagine if there was something like this on our side? I mean, we always say this. What the fuck would Fox or the New York Post be doing?
Where is CNN and MSNBC on this?
I don't know.
They ought to be doing it every night.
What the fuck they do?
You're absolutely right.
There's nothing better than a cup of bean before bed. No, you can't beat it. I think it's an indispensable tool in the toolkit that you try to get a good night's sleep with.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Sleep is the foundation of our mental and our physical health. When you sleep well, you can perform at your best, mentally and physically. Proper sleep can also increase focus, boost energy, and improve your mood. Introducing Beam's Dream Powder, a science-backed, healthy, hot cocoa for sleep. Dream has been a game changer for our sleep. Now, politics can be stressful, and it was horrible watching the hours tick by until the alarm went off. I love knowing all it takes now is one delicious cup of Beam before going to bed, and you'll be sleeping great, ready for the day ahead. Today, our listeners get a special discount on Beam's Dream Powder. They're science-backed, healthy, hot cocoa for sleep with no added sugar. Better sleep has never tasted better. There are tons of delicious flavors like chocolate peanut butter, cinnamon cocoa, and sea salt caramel. They're only 15 calories with 0 grams of sugar. I can't get enough, personally, of the chocolate peanut butter. It's always a treat, and now wanting to sleep better, it no longer keeps us up at night. Now, other sleep aids can cause next-day grogginess, but Dream contains an all-powerful blend of reishi extract, magnesium, theanine, melatonin, and nano CBD to help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up refreshed. Dream works fast, and the numbers don't lie. In a clinical study, 93% of participants reported Dream helped them get better sleep. 93%. Hey, James, you'd settle for 93% in any election.
Sure, I'd say 93% for anything. Like I say, this is indispensable tool in helping you get a good night's sleep. And it's something that's proven to work 93% of the time. You'd be a fool to not take advantage of it.
Absolutely. Beam Dream is easy to add to your nighttime routine. Just mix Dream in the hot water or milk froth and enjoy before bed. You'll find out why Forbes and the New York Times are all talking about Beam and why it's trusted by the world's top athletes and business professionals. Now, if you want to try Beam's best-selling Dream Powder and get up to 40% off for a limited time, when you go to shopbeam.com/warroom and use the code WARROOM at checkout. That's shopbeam.com/warroom and use the code WARROOM for up to 40% off. You can find the link, too, in our show notes. And now for our terrific questions from our terrific listeners. John in the Villages in Florida, you know that, James, says, who's making decisions for the Biden re-elect campaign? A few months ago, Biden was at the southern border criticizing Trump for torpedoing the border deal for personal benefit. Since then, we hear about crickets, surrogates, including, and everything else. Since then, surrogates, including VP Harris, should be at the border every week. James, your thoughts?
Oh, boy. They're complicated. I don't know if Harris going to the border is that good an idea. I do think talking about the collapsed deal that they negotiated to put it together is very important. And I do think it's very important what Congressman Colin Alred is running for the Senate. And a Republican businessman said, well, these people here, let's put them to work. And we should do that. But Biden should not hesitate about talking about the border, about talking about the legislation that was negotiated that could have been made the situation better. And I don't think the borders needs more political visits. I'm not sure that's very helpful, but I don't know. But the handling of this has not been particularly competent, I don't think, the political aspects of it.
Unfortunately, I agree. Nathan in Reno, Nevada asks, what person in history or fiction is the best Trump comparable? John Gotti, without the charm.
Oh, wow. He's so clownish. I mean, he's dangerous and he's clownish. And a kind of incompetent version of Hitler. And I know people say you should never compare anything to Hitler, but if you don't learn anything in a period of history from 1933 to 1945, you're missing a lot. And, of course, his first wife reported that he kept Hitler's biography on his nightstand. I think he kept Mein Kampf.
Yeah, he did.
But the cross between that and Tommy Tuberville, I guess those are the two people he most reminds me of.
It's a hell of a combination.
Right, it is.
Justin in Kensington, Maryland, right up the street from us, says that he's concerned that Biden withholding arms from Israel is pushing the scale in Trump's favor for the 24 election. Please tell me, James, I'm wrong.
I can't tell you that you're wrong, and I don't know how we got to this point. And a lot of it is from these people. Well, I'm actually a Democrat, but I got to say, is the demonstrators are demonstrating against Biden. There actually was one time where they had a pro-Palestinian demonstration and an anti-demonstration, and they both yelled together, "Fuck Joe Biden." And so somehow or another, this has become Joe Biden's fault. It's Joe Biden's fault that demonstrators are demonstrating against Joe Biden. And it's one of these issues that the people that do it have stopped to think of what Trump says or what life would be like if Trump were president. And I can't blame Biden for being in this position. I can't blame his staff for putting him in this position. But it's the oddest goddamn thing I've ever seen, where they're mad at the demonstrators. They're mad at Joe Biden because demonstrators are demonstrating against him. What a feat! It's a huge contradiction, like you can't believe.
Well, I think what he did was probably right. It's a little bit too late. But, let's just, I think if the Gaza war is still going on in August and September.
Why don't you demonstrate against that which needs to be demonstrated? Wasn't that the Israeli state and the massive, colossal negligence that resulted in the disaster that was October the 7th?
Right. No, I agree. Julie in Jacksonville, Florida says, if God forbid Trump prevails and somehow wins the election, who on the Democratic side will be blamed and who will rise out of the ashes to lead the Democratic Party? Julie, Joe Biden, and the people around him. That's it. Those are the people that will be blamed. He shouldn't have run for re-election. I'm going to vote for him. It'll be the easiest vote I've ever cast. But I wish he hadn't. And there are any number of attractive Democrats. I just hope there are, places out of the ashes to rise after we have a Trump presidency, if we do.
Agree with every word.
Steve in Hal, Michigan says, how concerned should we be in Michigan about the down ballot races? Could reverse coattails help Biden?
Oh, man. I was reading something, who has the coattails? I mean, there's a big disparity, and it's been true for a while in a lot of places between the Senate vote and the presidential vote. Mm-hmm. And, usually history tells us that in the end, they line up pretty good. The question is, in which direction do they line up? And Michigan and Nevada have turned out to – Nevada's been horrible. And I think it's a lot to do with younger voters. But Michigan is of – it looks like somehow or another, some polls, they vary, but – internally, I keep hearing a lot of not great things about Michigan. Yeah. So, we got to be careful, and it does hurt. With the Barrett population, which is more than just a trifling amount, has been pretty reliably Democratic and we don't know how it's going to react and come November. It's pretty critical.
I think reverse coattails are rare. I doubt it's going to happen in Michigan. The Senate race out there, good Democratic candidate, Alyssa Slotkin. I suspect she's going to win, but she's running against kind of a mainstream conservative Republican, Mike Rogers. I think the one place reverse coattails might work would be North Carolina. The top of that Republican ticket is so crazy, is so fringe. And I think a lot of people don't know it yet. And when they do, I think it's going to help Josh Stein win a convincing victory in the governor's race. And, Biden would have a shot if he can close the gap a little bit.
What they need to do with Mike Rogers, Larry Hogan, and all of them is, will you insist that the next Supreme Court nominee be pro-choice? Mm-hmm. And they can't do that.
Right.
They just can't.
Right.
And you just got to hit people in a place and it's essentially a very fair question, but it's a fair question that they can't answer.
Yeah. No.
It's a fair, like I said,
of course it
question.
Is. Yeah. Of course, they may do a Brett Kavanaugh or Amy Coney Barrett and lie, but they ought to be asked. Yeah. This is James. This is good. This is Nettie and Narragamba, Queensland, Australia.
Oh, wow.
Love to hear from those people down under. And she wants to know why the U.S. doesn't have compulsory voting. I'm not for compulsory voting. I'm for doing everything you can to make it easier to vote. The idea there's any kind of voting fraud in this country is total, complete nonsense. It's not true. Study after study, audit after audit has showed that. And unfortunately, some states like Georgia and others are making it harder to vote. We ought to do everything to make it easier to vote. I think Election Day ought to be a national holiday, but I don't believe in compulsory voting.
So what voting should be compulsory? Because in a lot of systems, see where Austria has, high participation rates. They have one election every 5 years. Whoever runs the parliament does everything. Here, you vote president, you vote for statewide offices, you vote for mayor, you vote for county offices, you vote for God knows, I don't know, you vote for property tax referendum, you vote for constitutional amendments. To the compulsory voting people, it's practical, but voting in what is compulsory at what time? I can't tell you, it's embarrassing to admit this, but my voter participation is not great because I forget about them. I'm generally traveling on election day if I don't remember to vote absentee or vote like you lose out. So, what's the penalty? And I agree. It sounds good, but it's impractical in the United States. It's totally impractical.
Right. Make it easier to vote. Don't make it compulsory. James, this is a good final question. Jay in Camano Island, Washington. Are we all suffering from a lack of imagination on the influence of Russian money? How do we expose it?
Well, I don't think that people like us are from anything. I think we're outraged by it. I don't understand the Republicans, a lot of them, not all of them, some of them, but a lot of them are pulling for Russia openly. Trump doesn't even try to hide it. He doesn't even hide it. Marjorie Taylor Greene doesn't hide it. They're pulling for Russia. They like Putin. And they don't pay much of a political price for it. It's odd as it seems. This whole thing is just taken over and eating people's brains, and it's frustrating. But yes, the influence everywhere. You just tell me, you don't think they're behind this stuff at Columbia and UCLA? Of course they are. Of course, Trump give them everything they want. All right, telling you that. He did, just as Professor Richardson said, he can pull out of NATO. It's going to be the greatest foreign policy achievement in modern world history is Putin successfully destroying NATO. That's just, the more I think about it, the more depressed I get.
Well, James, I don't want you to get depressed, although you have great cause to be depressed when you think about this. But one thing that lifts me up is the quality of these questions. I know we didn't get to some this week. We're going to get to some of them next week, I promise. Please keep them coming in. And in your spare time, go to Substack and look for Carville Hunt on Politics War Room. We'll give you even more of our wisdom. Thanks for listening. Hey, thanks for listening to Politics War Room with James Carville, and I'm Al Hunt. Don't forget to send your questions for us by email to politicswarroom@gmail.com or tweet them for next week's show at Politicon. Now, following this episode, we'd really appreciate it if you check out the links to our sponsors, ExpressVPN, 3-Day Blinds, and Beam in our episode show notes. We deeply thank you for supporting them because when you do, it helps make this podcast happen. To keep up with us, subscribe to Politics War Room on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. You also can find other shows you might enjoy on the Politicon YouTube channel or when you search Politicon on your favorite podcast sites. Now remember, please rate the show with a 5-star review. We'll be back next week with another show as we continue our War Room planning.